Get out! You are no longer welcome here.
Please don't do this. We're family.
Family? After what you did, just leave.
I have nowhere to go.
That's not my problem anymore.
Sheriff, these are the documents you requested.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll review them.
Please, don't take our home.
I'll do what I can. These documents are forgeries. How do you explain that?
No, that's impossible. They were verified.
Verified by whom? Your name isn't on them.
Must be a mistake.
"Get off my property," my daughter said, pointing toward the road as if I were a stranger. I stood on the porch of Harrison Apple Orchard staring at the cardboard boxes filled with my clothes, my wedding photographs, and 38 years of memories. Megan remained inside the house while her husband Brian recorded me with his phone. "This is my home," I whispered. "Your father and I built our life here." Megan handed Sheriff Daniel Brooks a folder and claimed I was an unstable trespasser who refused to leave. He studied the documents, then slowly lifted his eyes. "Mrs. Carter," he asked, "where is the court order declaring your mother legally incapacitated?" The confidence vanished from Megan's face. "Before I tell you how my own daughter tried to erase me from my home, please, like this video and subscribe. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place, and let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there." 18 months before my daughter stood in my doorway and called me a trespasser, I buried my husband beneath a cold North Carolina sky. Thomas Harrison had been my husband for 38 years. He was the kind of man who never spoke louder than necessary, but when he gave his word, people believed him. He could repair a broken irrigation line before breakfast, remember the name of every seasonal worker, and tell by the smell of the wind whether rain would reach the orchard before nightfall. Pancreatic cancer took him in less than 9 months. At first, we told ourselves the treatments would buy us time. Then we stopped talking about years and started talking about seasons. Thomas wanted to see one more apple harvest. He made it through the first week of October, when the trees were heavy with red fruit and the hills around Asheville looked as if they had been painted in fire. He died 3 weeks later in our bedroom holding my hand. After the funeral, Harrison Apple Orchard no longer felt like home. It felt like a museum built around my grief. Every room carried a piece of him. His work boots still sat beside the back door. His reading glasses remained on the table next to his chair. I could not bring myself to move his coffee mug from the kitchen counter, even though a pale ring had formed beneath it. For nearly 4 decades, Thomas and I had eaten breakfast together before sunrise. After he was gone, I would sit at the table with the 2 cups of coffee before remembering that only one of us was still there. The silence was the hardest part. During the day, the orchard kept me moving. There were invoices to review workers, to pay deliveries to confirm, and equipment that always seemed to need attention. But at night, the old farmhouse settled around me with long creaks and sighs, and I could hear every empty space Thomas had left behind. My daughter Megan came to stay 3 days after the funeral. She arrived with her husband Brian and their daughter Lily. Megan was 43, then polished and organized, with the same determined expression she had worn since childhood, whenever she wanted something done her way. She hugged me tightly in the hallway. "You shouldn't be alone right now, Mom," she said. "We're staying as long as you need us." I remember closing my eyes and holding on to her. Megan and I had never been as close as I once imagined a mother and daughter should be. She had always believed Thomas expected too much from her. When she was young, she complained that the orchard came before everything else. Thomas missed school concerts during harvest season and sometimes left family dinners to deal with broken machinery or weather emergencies. I tried to explain that the orchard supported us, but Megan saw every sacrifice as evidence that the land mattered more than she did. As an adult, she moved to Charlotte, married Brian, and built a life that looked very different from ours. She visited on holidays, but there was always a distance between us, something polite and careful that neither of us knew how to cross. After Thomas died, I hoped that distance might finally disappear. Megan cooked casseroles, sorted sympathy cards, and made sure I took the medication my doctor had prescribed to help me sleep. She cleaned out the refrigerator, replaced a broken porch light, and sat beside me when grief struck without warning. Sometimes she would find me standing in Thomas's study, touching the back of his chair. She never told me to move on. Instead, she would place a hand on my shoulder and say, "I'm here, Mom." Those words meant more to me than she could have known. Brian offered to help with the business side of the orchard. He owned a construction company and spoke confidently about budgets, maintenance schedules, and property values. "You have enough to carry emotionally," he told me one afternoon. "Let me look over the repair costs. Thomas handled so much of this. There's no reason you should have to figure it all out alone." At the time, I thought he was being kind. Brian had never seemed especially interested in orchard work before. He preferred golf courses, downtown restaurants, and new developments with stone entrances and matching mailboxes. Still, he was family, and I was tired. I gave him access to several maintenance files and last year's expense reports. Lily stayed in the guest cottage with her parents. She was 23 and studying nursing at a university in Charlotte. Of the three of them, she seemed most uncomfortable with how quickly everyone had moved into Thomas's routines. She asked before entering his study. She never sat in his chair. When she helped me box his clothes for donation, she cried into one of his old flannel shirts. "I'm sorry, Grandma," she whispered. "I know everyone keeps saying he's in a better place, but I still wish he were here." "So do I." I told her, "Yeah." Those moments with Lily made the house feel warm again. A week after the funeral, Megan found me reviewing orchard accounts at the dining table. She sat across from me and watched for a while before asking, "What happens to all of this now?" I looked up. "What do you mean, the land, the house, the orchard?" Her tone was casual, but her eyes remained on the papers. "The orchard is held in the Thomas Harrison Family Trust," I explained. "Your father and I arranged it years ago." Megan leaned back. "So you own it?" "The trust owns it. I'm the managing trustee, and I have the right to live here for the rest of my life. And after that, you are named as the successor trustee. Eventually, the property is intended to remain in the family." Megan nodded slowly. Brian, who had been standing near the kitchen doorway, stepped closer. "Can the trust sell land?" he asked. "In certain circumstances," I said. "But Thomas wanted the orchard protected." "What about borrowing against it?" Megan asked. I remember feeling a small flicker of discomfort then, though I quickly pushed it away. "Why are you asking?" She smiled and reached across the table to cover my hand. "I'm not trying to upset you. I just want to understand what you're responsible for now." Her answer sounded reasonable. I was grieving exhausted and grateful not to be alone. I mistook questions for concern because I needed them to be concern. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual. Sometime after midnight, I woke and heard a floorboard creak downstairs. I assumed Lily had gone to the kitchen for water. The next morning, Brian was already outside talking to one of the orchard managers. Thomas's study door stood slightly open. I did not think anything of it. I did not know that while I slept, Brian had entered the study, opened the filing cabinet, and photographed page after page of our trust documents. I did not know he had copied account numbers, signatures, and legal language Thomas had spent years putting in place to protect me. And I certainly did not know that my daughter had already begun asking herself how soon the orchard could become hers. At first, Megan's help felt like mercy. She began by sorting the mail every morning. She placed the sympathy cards in one pile, the orchard invoices in another, and the household bills in a neat blue folder. "You shouldn't have to look at all of this every day," she told me. "Let me handle the small things until you feel stronger." I was grateful. Grief had made ordinary tasks feel strangely difficult. I could stand in front of the washing machine and forget why I had gone into the laundry room. I would open the pantry and stare at the shelves without remembering what I planned to cook. Those moments frightened me, but Dr. Emily Foster had assured me that grief exhaustion and poor sleep could affect concentration. Megan saw those same moments and began treating them as evidence of something more serious. One morning, I found her opening a letter addressed only to me. "That's from the insurance company," I said. "I know," she replied without looking up. "They're changing some policy language. I'll take care of it." I can read my own mail. Megan stopped and gave me a wounded expression. Of course you can. I'm only trying to help. The way she said it made me feel ungrateful. I apologized. That became the pattern. Megan would cross a small boundary, I would object, and she would respond as though my objection proved I was unreasonable. Within a month, she had redirected most of the household bills to her email. She said electronic statements were safer and easier to track. I did not remember giving her permission to cancel the paper copies, but she insisted we had discussed it. You told me you were tired of all the envelopes, she said. I said the mail was piling up. That isn't the same thing. She sighed. Mom, you've been under enormous stress. It's okay if you don't remember every conversation? Her words settled in my chest like cold rain. I had always trusted my memory. For 32 years, I had worked as a high school counselor. I remembered the names of students long after graduation. I remembered which children had lost parents, which ones feared going home, and which ones needed someone to believe in them before they could believe in themselves. Now, my own daughter was looking at me as though I could not trust my mind. The changes continued so gradually that I did not recognize the full pattern. Megan began managing the electric bill property insurance and payroll correspondence. Brian asked to review equipment contracts. When repair estimates arrived, he took them before I saw them. Then, Megan turned her attention to my car. It began after I missed the turn into the pharmacy parking lot. I had driven that road hundreds of times, but construction had changed the entrance, and I passed it before realizing my mistake. Megan was in the passenger seat. You didn't see the sign, she asked. The entrance moved. She said nothing else until we returned home. That evening, I heard her speaking quietly to Brian in the guest cottage. She drove right past it, Megan said. She's distracted, Brian answered. What happens if next time it's a person? The next morning, Megan placed my car keys in her purse. I think I should drive for a while, she said. I laughed because I thought she was joking. Megan, I have been driving since before you were born, and lately, you've been sleeping badly and taking medication. The medication is for nighttime. I'm not saying forever, just until you're steadier. I resisted, but she reminded me of the missed turn a forgotten grocery item and the time I left my reading glasses in the refrigerator after putting away milk. She listed those incidents with such calm certainty that they began to sound alarming. I finally agreed to let her drive for 2 weeks. 2 weeks passed, then 4. Each time I asked for my keys, Megan found a reason to delay. The tires need checking. The registration paperwork is in Brian's office. You seemed tired this morning. I began to feel trapped on my own property. The orchard was large enough that I could walk for an hour without leaving the land. But freedom is not measured by acreage. It is measured by whether you can decide where to go and when to leave. Without my keys, I needed Megan's permission to visit the bank, the pharmacy, my church, or Susan Whitmore's office. I did not yet understand how useful that dependence would become to her. Megan also began speaking about me differently in front of other people. One afternoon, my neighbor Carol Jennings stopped by with a peach cobbler. Carol had known me for more than 20 years. We sat at the kitchen table and I mentioned that I had missed our church book club. You forgot again, Megan asked from the counter. I looked at her. No, I decided not to go. Megan smiled at Carol. She's been mixing up her schedule lately. I have not. It's normal after everything you've been through, Megan said quickly. We're keeping an eye on it. Carol's face softened with concern. From that day forward, she began calling before visiting to ask Megan whether I was having a good day. At the orchard office, Brian did something similar. When I questioned why a repair estimate was nearly twice the usual amount, he said, "We reviewed that last week, Chloe." "No, we didn't." He exchanged a look with Megan. "Maybe you were tired," she said. I knew we had not discussed it. Yet the more confidently they contradicted me, the harder it became to hold on to certainty. At night, I began writing things down. I kept a small notebook beside my bed. and recorded appointments, conversations, and decisions. I told myself it was simply good organization. In truth, I was afraid. Lily noticed before anyone else. One evening, she found me checking my notebook after Megan insisted I had agreed to replace the orchard's storage roof. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked. "I'm making sure I remember correctly." Lily hesitated. My mom has always been controlling when she's scared. Scared of what? I don't know. She looked toward the guest cottage. "I heard Dad talking about selling the south field. Mom told him not to mention it around you yet." My stomach tightened. The south field is not for sale. That's what I thought. Before we could say more, Megan entered the room. "What are you two whispering about?" "Nothing," Lily replied too quickly. Megan studied us, then turned to me with a bright smile. "Mom, I finished simplifying your bank correspondence. Everything will come electronically now." I stared at her. "What do you mean, everything? The monthly statements, notices, tax documents? It's all safer online. You canceled my paper statements I told you I was going to." "No, you didn't." Megan's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough for warmth to disappear from her eyes. "We had this conversation 2 days ago, I would remember." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "That is exactly why I'm worried." I pulled away from her. For the first time, I saw the possibility that her concern was not simply concern. It was a story. A story she was telling the family, the neighbors, and perhaps even me. And in that story, I was becoming a woman who could no longer remember what she had said, what she had agreed to, or what belonged to her. Kethuk Fanba. Fan Bon. 3 months after Thomas died, I scheduled cataract surgery on my left eye. The procedure had been planned before his diagnosis, but I postponed it during his treatment. By then, nighttime driving had become difficult, and the print on invoices blurred unless I held the pages beneath a bright lamp. Dr. Emily Foster encouraged me to proceed. "The recovery should be straightforward," she said. "But you'll need someone to drive you and help with medications for several days." Megan immediately volunteered. "Of course, I'll take care of her," she said. "That's what daughters are for." I wanted to believe her. On the morning of the surgery, she drove me to the outpatient center in Asheville. She held my purse, answered questions at the front desk, and remained beside me until the nurse took me through the double doors. When I returned home, my vision was cloudy, and the light made my eye ache. Megan guided me upstairs, arranged my medication, and placed a glass of water beside the bed. For the first 2 days, she was gentle and attentive. On the third morning, she brought a stack of papers into my room. "I need you to sign a few things," she said. I was sitting near the window with dark glasses over my eyes. "What things?" "Insurance updates, authorization for the roof repairs, a form allowing Brian to speak with the county inspector. Leave them on the table. We need to send them today. I can't read them today." "I'll read them to you." Something in her voice made me hesitate. Megan pulled a chair beside the bed and began summarizing the pages. She moved quickly, describing each one in broad terms. "This confirms the contractor. This updates emergency contacts. This allows me to handle business matters temporarily while you recover." I lifted my head. "What kind of business matters?" "Just routine things. Then they can wait until I can see properly." Megan exhaled sharply. "Mom, everything cannot stop because you had eye surgery." "I did not say everything had to stop." "Then sign the forms." Her impatience surprised me. I removed the dark glasses and tried to focus on her face. It remained soft around the edges. "Put them in my desk. I'll have Susan look at them." For a moment, Megan said nothing. Then her voice changed. "You trust Susan more than you trust me." "That is not what I said. I left my home. I rearranged my life. I have spent months taking care of you, and you still treat me like I'm trying to steal from you." The word steal hung between us. I had not used it. Megan stood, abruptly gathered the papers, and walked toward the door. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm tired. I don't want to sign something I cannot read." She turned back with tears in her eyes. Do you know how painful it is to feel that your own mother does not trust you? Guilt moved through me immediately. I do trust you. Then why do you need a lawyer to approve every little thing? Because Thomas always had Susan review legal documents. Megan looked away. Thomas never trusted anyone. She left before I could answer. For the rest of the day, she was distant. She delivered my medication without conversation and allowed Brian to bring dinner upstairs. I wondered whether I had been too suspicious. That was how Megan worked on me. She made my caution feel like cruelty. What I did not know was that the documents she brought into my bedroom were not routine authorizations. They included a financial power of attorney, a certification of incapacity, and an acknowledgement that I had voluntarily surrendered control of the trust. My refusal did not stop her. It only forced her to find another method. Brian already had copies of my driver's license, social security number, and tax identification documents. From the files he photographed in Thomas's study, he also had examples of my signature on contracts and trust records. Later, investigators would show me how carefully someone had practiced that signature. The first attempts looked stiff. The letters leaned at the wrong angle. By the final version, the imitation was close enough to fool a clerk who had never met me. Brian also contacted Patricia Nolan, a mobile notary from Hendersonville. Patricia had notarized one construction contract for his company several years earlier. At the time, she was behind on rent and caring for a disabled sister. Brian knew she needed money. He asked her to notarize several documents without witnessing the signatures. Patricia initially refused. Then Brian offered her $5,000. She told herself the papers involved a family agreement. She told herself no one would be harmed. She told herself she was only confirming identities Brian claimed he had already verified. People often build a staircase of small excuses before stepping into something unforgivable. Megan's role involved the medical records. Because she had begun accompanying me to appointments, the clinic listed her as an approved contact for scheduling and insurance questions. That access did not entitle her to alter my records, but it allowed her to obtain copies of ordinary forms. One document contained Dr. Foster's signature beneath a note about post-surgical assistance. Another included language about temporary visual limitations. Megan and Brian used those pages to create something entirely different. They changed temporary assistance into ongoing supervision. They changed visual impairment following surgery into cognitive impairment, affecting independent judgment. A second physician's name was added to make the evaluation appear independent. There was no second physician. During my recovery, Megan repeatedly asked whether I knew what day it was. She asked whether I remembered taking my medication. Once when I answered Tuesday instead of Wednesday, she glanced at Brian as though I had confirmed their worst fears. I began to dread her questions. 2 weeks later, my vision had improved enough for me to return to Thomas's study. I had avoided the room since the surgery. Dust lay across the desk, and the faint smell of his cedarwood aftershave still clung to the curtains. I wanted to review the trust documents myself. The filing cabinet stood against the far wall. Thomas always kept the second drawer locked because it contained legal records, property deeds, and tax documents. The drawer was slightly open. At first, I thought I had forgotten to lock it. Then I noticed scratches near the keyhole. I pulled the drawer out and searched through the folders. The trust binder was there, but one page was missing. I remembered the page because Thomas had once made me read it aloud while Susan explained the succession process. It stated that Megan could become successor trustee only if 2 independent physicians determined that I lacked capacity and a court issued a formal order confirming it. Without those conditions, she had no authority. I searched the drawer twice, then checked the desk, the safe, and every nearby folder. The page was gone. I found Megan in the kitchen. "Have you been inside your father's filing cabinet?" She looked at me with perfect surprise. "No." "Why, a page is missing from the trust. Maybe Dad removed it." "He wouldn't have. Maybe you moved it." "I did not." Megan slowly placed the knife she was holding on the cutting board. Mom, you've been misplacing things for weeks. My pulse quickened. This is different. Is it? I stared at my daughter and understood that she was not frightened by my accusation. She had been expecting it. That night, I locked the remaining trust documents inside a small fireproof box and hid the key in the hem of an old winter coat. It was the first deliberate act of protection I took against my own family. But by then, Megan and Brian no longer needed the missing page. They had already used its absence to rewrite the rules. The surveyors arrived on a Monday morning in late April. I saw 3 men near the south field carrying tripods, measuring poles, and bright orange flags. A white utility truck was parked beside the orchard road. No one had called me. I walked toward them, using Thomas's old wooden cane because the ground was still soft from spring rain. "Can I help you?" I asked. The oldest man lowered his clipboard. "We're completing a preliminary site assessment." "For whom?" He glanced toward the farmhouse. Carter Ridge Development. I had never heard the name. "You are standing on Harrison property." He checked his papers. "We were told access had been approved by the owner. I am the managing trustee and I approved nothing." The men exchanged uneasy looks. Before anyone answered, Megan came hurrying down the path. "Mom, there you are. What are these people doing here?" She smiled at the surveyors. "There's been a misunderstanding. They're checking drainage and road erosion." The oldest man opened his mouth, but Megan cut him off. "Brian arranged it after the flooding near the south field. We did not have flooding. Not serious flooding. Just runoff." I looked at the orange flag stretching toward the tree line. "You do not need to mark half the field to inspect runoff." Megan took my arm. "You're upsetting yourself." "I am not upset. I am asking a question." Her fingers tightened. "We'll discuss it inside." I pulled my arm free. "No, we will discuss it here." One of the younger surveyors shifted awkwardly. A rolled map rested beneath his arm. I caught a glimpse of printed labels. "Access Road Cabin Cluster Parking Area." "Let me see that map," I said. Megan stepped between us. "That's preliminary." "Preliminary for what?" At that moment, Brian's black SUV came speeding up the orchard road. He parked beside their truck and got out with an expression of irritated surprise. "What's going on?" "I would like to know," I said. Brian looked at the surveyors. "I told you to begin near the eastern boundary." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. Megan closed her eyes briefly. I turned toward him. "Begin what?" Brian recovered quickly. "A general feasibility study." "For drainage?" "For the property." "I did not authorize a property study." He folded his arms. "Chloe, the orchard is expensive to maintain. Equipment costs are rising. Labor is rising. Insurance is rising. We need to understand the value of the land. The family does not control this property." Megan stepped closer. "Mom, no one is trying to take anything from you." "Then tell these men to leave." Brian looked toward the south field. "They've already been paid. That is not my problem." "It becomes your problem when you refuse to make practical decisions." His tone was no longer respectful. It carried the impatience of someone who believed he had already won an argument I had not known we were having. I pointed toward the road. "Get them off my land." The surveyors did not wait for further instructions. They collected their equipment and returned to the truck. As they left, one of the orange flags remained planted near the first row of apple trees. I pulled it from the soil and held it in my hand. "What exactly are you planning?" I asked. Brian rubbed his jaw. "We are exploring options." "What options?" "A small development." Megan added quickly. "Only on land the orchard barely uses. The south field is not unused. It protects the watershed and provides access for harvest equipment." Brian gave a dismissive shrug. "That land could produce more money in 1 year than the orchard makes in 10. Money for whom?" "For all of us." I looked at Megan. She would not meet my eyes. I felt something inside me shift. Until then, I had still tried to explain every troubling action as grief pressure or misguided concern. The surveyors made that impossible. "You have been discussing my property with developers," I said. Megan finally looked at me. "It is going to be mine someday." The honesty of that sentence stunned me. Someday is not today. "I know that. Do you?" Brian stepped forward. "No one is asking you to leave. We're talking about using part of the land intelligently. This land is not collateral for your business." His face tightened. "This has nothing to do with my business." That was a lie. I did not yet know the size of it, but I heard it clearly. Megan's patience broke. Dad held on to this place because he could never imagine any life beyond it. Now you are doing the same thing. Your father protected this orchard for you. For me? She said bitterly. He missed half my childhood because of these trees? That is not fair. Isn't it? Her voice rose. Every birthday in October came second to harvest. Every vacation depended on weather. Every family decision began with what the orchard needed. Your father worked to support us. He worshipped this place. I stared at her. Megan's eyes were wet, but her expression was hard. And now you are turning it into a museum for one lonely widow. The word struck with more force than a slap. Brian looked away. Even Megan seemed startled by what she had said, but she did not apologize. I pressed the orange flag into her hand. Get out of my sight. Mom, now. They walked back toward the house while I remained beside the south field. The trees were beginning to bloom. White petals trembled in the breeze, delicate and temporary. Thomas and I had planted many of those trees ourselves. We had worked through drought frost and years when the harvest barely covered expenses. We had argued, there, laughed there, and once danced between the rows after learning Megan had been accepted into college. To Brian, it was acreage. To Megan, it was an inheritance she believed had been delayed. To me, it was a life. That evening, neither of them joined me for dinner. I went into the dining room to collect the mail and found a large folded sheet beneath one of Brian's folders. It was the map the surveyor had been carrying. Across the top were the words, Carter Ridge Luxury Retreat, Preliminary Development Plan. The map showed 24 vacation cabins, a restaurant, a swimming pool, and a paved entrance cutting through the south field. Several rows of apple trees had been marked for removal. In the lower corner was the logo of Carter Ridge Development, LLC. I took the map upstairs and searched the North Carolina Business Registry on my laptop. The company had been formed in Charlotte. Brian Carter was listed as manager. Megan Carter was listed as an organizing member. Then I saw the filing date, 6 days after Thomas's funeral. I sat in the darkness, staring at the screen, 6 days after I buried my husband. My daughter and her husband created a company designed to profit from the land he had spent his life protecting. Their plan had not begun when the surveyors arrived. It had not begun when Megan canceled my bank statements or took away my keys. It had begun while sympathy flowers were still filling my house. I printed the registration record and placed it beside the development map. For the first time, I stopped asking whether I was imagining things. I knew exactly what I was looking at. My daughter was not preparing to inherit the orchard someday. She and Brian were already treating it as though they owned it. The morning after I discovered Carter Ridge Development, LLC, I told Megan I needed to attend a routine dental appointment. It was the first lie I had deliberately told my daughter. She offered to drive me, but I said Carol Jennings had already agreed to take me. Megan seemed irritated, especially when I reminded her that my car keys were still in her purse. You shouldn't be driving yet, she said. I'm not. Carol is. Her eyes narrowed slightly. What dentist are you seeing? The same one I've seen for 12 years. I kept my voice steady, even as my hands trembled beneath the kitchen table. Carol arrived 20 minutes later. I waited until we were several miles from the orchard before asking her to take me to Susan Whitmore's office instead. Carol glanced at me. Chloe. What is going on? I'm not sure yet. That was not entirely true. I knew something was terribly wrong. I simply did not know how far Megan and Brian had already gone. Susan's office occupied the second floor of a brick building near downtown Asheville. Thomas and I had known her for more than 20 years. She had prepared our wills, organized the family trust, and helped us protect the orchard from unnecessary taxes and careless development. When Susan entered the conference room, she looked older than I remembered. Her silver hair was pulled into a low knot, and reading glasses rested on a chain around her neck. She hugged me before sitting down. "I'm sorry I haven't called more often," she said. Thomas was a good man. The mention of his name nearly broke me. I placed the development map and the business registration on the table. "I need you to tell me whether my daughter can do this." Susan studied the documents without speaking. Then I explained everything. I told her about the missing trust page, the surveyors, the canceled statements, the documents Megan wanted me to sign after surgery, and the way she had begun telling people I could not remember conversations. Susan's expression grew more serious with every detail. "Did you sign any power of attorney? After Thomas died? No. Did you authorize Megan to act as successor trustee? No. Have you been examined by a neurologist or psychiatrist regarding your legal capacity? No. Has any court declared you incapacitated? Absolutely not." Susan stood and crossed to a locked cabinet. She removed a thick folder marked Thomas Harrison Family Trust. "The trust is clear," she said. "You are the current managing trustee. You have the right to control the property and live there for the rest of your life. And Megan, she is named as successor trustee, but only under specific circumstances. 2 independent doctors and a court order." Susan looked at me sharply. "You remember that?" "I remember everything that matters." "I believe you." Those 3 words brought tears to my eyes. For months, Megan had made me feel as if every disagreement proved something was wrong with me. Susan did not speak slowly. She did not tilt her head with pity. She treated me like the woman I had always been. She opened her computer and searched the county property records. At first, she frowned. Then she leaned closer to the screen. "What is it?" I asked. Susan did not answer immediately. She printed several pages and placed them on the table between us. A document titled Trustee's Deed had been recorded 6 weeks earlier. It stated that I had been declared legally incapacitated and that Megan Carter had assumed control as successor trustee. Acting in that role, Megan had transferred all 28 acres of Harrison Apple Orchard to Carter Ridge Development, LLC. For a moment, the words made no sense. I read them again, then again. The document included a signature resembling mine beneath a statement acknowledging that I could no longer manage my financial affairs. "I never signed this," Susan pointed to another section. "It claims 2 physicians certified your incapacity." I recognized Dr. Emily Foster's name. The second name was Dr. Jonathan Pierce. I don't know anyone named Jonathan Pierce. Susan began searching professional licensing records. No physician with that name and the listed license number practiced in North Carolina. She called Dr. Foster's office while I sat across from her, struggling to breathe normally. The receptionist would not discuss medical records without authorization, so Susan prepared a written request. Then she examined the notary section. "Patricia Nolan," she said quietly. "Do you know her? I've seen the name on local filings. She is a mobile notary. I have never met her." Susan tapped the document. "She certified that you appeared before her." I did not. The room seemed to tilt around me. My daughter had not merely discussed selling land. She had created a legal fiction in which I was no longer capable of making decisions. On paper, I had been erased. "What happens now?" I asked. Susan folded her hands. "We challenge the deed and request an emergency injunction preventing any sale mortgage or further transfer." "How long will that take?" "If we can demonstrate immediate risk, we may get a temporary order quickly. But I need certified copies of the complete trust. You have them." Susan's expression changed. "I should." She returned to the cabinet and removed a second folder. She compared the archived trust certification against the index. 1 page was missing. The same page missing from Thomas's filing cabinet. Susan searched another drawer, then the digital records. The scanned file contained a gap where the succession requirements should have appeared. "That is impossible," she whispered. "Who has access to your files?" "My staff." "Me." "Occasionally, clients during document review, but never unsupervised." "Did Brian ever come here?" Susan thought for a moment. "He came after Thomas died. He said you had asked him to collect copies of the estate documents." "I never sent him." Her face hardened. "I refused to release originals, but I allowed him to review the family file in the conference room while my assistant prepared copies." "Was he alone for perhaps 5 minutes?" 5 minutes had been enough. Susan reached for the phone. "I'm contacting the county register and filing notice that the deed is disputed. I'll also prepare the emergency petition. She warned me not to confront Megan or Brian. Right now, they believe the transfer worked. If they feel secure, they may continue communicating with developers, banks, or contractors. Those communications could become evidence. How am I supposed to sit across from my daughter and pretend I don't know? You are not pretending forever. You are buying time." Before I left, Susan copied every document I had brought and gave me a small digital recorder. "Document conversations when legally permitted. Keep notes. Preserve messages. And do not sign anything." Carol was waiting downstairs. On the drive back, I looked through the window at the Blue Ridge Mountains. Thomas and I had driven those roads when we were young, before Megan was born, before the orchard belonged to us, before I understood how quickly love could become entangled with money. When I returned home, Megan was standing on the porch. "You were gone a long time," she said. "The dentist was delayed." She searched my face. "What did they do?" "A cleaning." I walked past her before she could ask more. That night, Susan called me from her office. She had begun verifying the medical certifications. Dr. Foster had never conducted a capacity evaluation. The second doctor did not exist. The deed was built on fraud, but fraud recorded at the courthouse could still cause terrible damage before it was undone. Susan's final warning stayed with me long after the call ended. "Chloe, they are moving faster than we thought. Until the court intervenes, do not assume your home is safe." Once Megan realized I was no longer accepting every decision, quietly her concern for me became a public performance. She called my sister Diane in Tennessee and told her I had begun wandering around the orchard after midnight. I learned about it when Diane phoned me one afternoon. "Chloe, are you sleeping?" she asked. "As well as anyone who recently lost her husband." "Megan says you were outside in your nightgown last week." I closed my eyes. I stepped onto the porch because I heard coyotes near the chicken coop. "She said you didn't know where you were." "That is a lie." Diane fell silent. "I'm only worried about you." "No, you're repeating something without asking whether it is true." I don't want to argue. Neither did I. That was what made Megan's strategy so effective. Anyone who questioned her appeared caring. Anyone who defended me appeared emotional or defensive. She told relatives I sometimes forgot Thomas was dead. The truth was that once, while half asleep, I called his name after hearing a sound in the hallway. She told people I misplaced medication. The truth was that she moved my pill organizer from the bathroom to the kitchen without telling me. She told our pastor that I had accused workers of stealing. The truth was that 2 maintenance receipts disappeared from my desk after Brian entered the office. Every story contained a small piece of reality wrapped inside a larger lie. The worst humiliation came at my nephew's birthday dinner. Diane had traveled from Tennessee and several relatives gathered at a restaurant outside Asheville. Megan insisted I attend. "It will be good for you to get out," she said. I suspected she wanted an audience. The dinner began pleasantly enough. People told stories about Thomas. My nephew raised a glass in his memory, and for a few moments, I felt surrounded by family instead of enemies. Then, Megan placed her hand over mine. "Mom, we need to talk about the future." The table quieted. "What future?" "Your living arrangements." I pulled my hand away. This is not the time. There may never be a comfortable time. Brian reached into a folder beside his chair and removed several papers. My stomach tightened. Megan looked around the table with an expression of practiced sorrow. Mom has been struggling more than she admits. She forgets appointments. She becomes suspicious. She sometimes believes people are taking things from her. That is not true. Diane looked at me carefully. Chloe, no one is accusing you. That is exactly what she is doing. Megan lowered her voice. This reaction is part of what concerns us. Brian slid the papers across the table. They appeared to contain medical letterhead and signatures. We've consulted professionals, he said. Chloe may need supervised care. You forged those documents. Several people gasped. Megan's eyes filled with tears. Do you hear yourself? Yes, I hear myself clearly. My cousin Robert leaned toward me. Maybe you should let Megan explain. I have spent my entire life listening to other people explain who I am. I will not allow my daughter to do it now. Megan shook her head. This is the paranoia we've been dealing with. The word struck like a door slamming shut. Once a person is labeled paranoid, every objection becomes proof. Every fact becomes suspicion. Every attempt to defend oneself becomes another symptom. I looked around the table. People who had known me for decades avoided my eyes. One aunt began speaking to me slowly. Chloe, perhaps assisted living, would only be temporary. I am not leaving my home. No one said you had to decide tonight. Megan has already decided for me. Brian leaned back. See? She thinks everyone is conspiring against her. I wanted to stand and shout. I wanted to throw the forged papers into his face. Instead, I remembered Susan's instructions. Do not reveal the investigation. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. I am tired, I said. I'm going home. Megan stood. I'll drive you. I would rather walk. The restaurant was 12 miles from the orchard, so the statement was ridiculous. But it was the only dignity I could find in that moment. Lily rose from the other end of the table. I'll take Grandma. Megan's expression sharpened. We came together. Then Dad can drive you. In the parking lot, Lily unlocked her car and waited until we were inside before speaking. I'm sorry. You did not do this. I should have said something sooner. I looked at her. What do you know? Lily gripped the steering wheel. Mom told everyone those doctors examined you at the house. They did not. I know, I was there almost every day after your surgery. No doctors came. Did she ever mention their names? One was Dr. Foster. The other was someone I didn't recognize. Jonathan Pierce. Lily shook her head. I searched that name. I couldn't find him. My throat tightened. Susan had already discovered the same thing, but hearing Lily confirm it mattered. It meant I was not alone inside Megan's version of reality. When we reached the orchard, I asked Lily to walk with me to the barn. The evening air smelled of damp soil and apple blossoms. No one could hear us there. I need you to be careful, I said. Are Mom and Dad trying to take the orchard? I hesitated. Yes. Lily covered her mouth. I cannot tell you everything yet. Susan is investigating. My parents don't know you've spoken to her? No. She nodded slowly. I won't tell them. From that night forward, I documented everything. I wrote down dates times witnesses and exact statements. I photographed the orange survey flags, the development map, and the missing spaces in my files. I saved voicemail messages in which Megan referred to me as confused. I recorded the days she withheld my keys and the occasions Brian removed documents from the orchard office. I created duplicate copies and gave them to Carol. For the first time since Thomas died, I felt a sense of purpose. Megan had spent months building a story in which I was helpless. I began building a record of the truth, but living inside the house became unbearable. Relatives called to suggest memory clinics. Neighbors asked Megan whether I was safe to be alone. Orchard employees began seeking Brian's approval instead of mine. One morning, I asked the foreman why he had ordered lumber without consulting me. Mr. Carter said you had delegated authority, he replied. I did not. His face flushed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrison. He showed me paperwork. What paperwork? He said you weren't handling business decisions anymore. By then, Megan's lie had spread beyond the family. It was becoming an operating fact. That evening, I heard raised voices from the guest cottage. Lily was arguing with her parents. You can't keep telling people Grandma's sick when she isn't, she said. Megan answered in a low, furious tone. You are 23 years old. You do not understand what is happening. I understand that no doctors examined her here. A long silence followed. Then Brian said, Stay out of adult matters. The door opened. Lily came outside, wiping tears from her face. Megan appeared behind her and saw me standing near the path. For one suspended moment, none of us spoke. Then Megan smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had just identified a threat. And from that moment on, Lily was no longer merely my granddaughter in Megan's eyes. She was someone who might help me fight back. Lily found the emails 3 nights later. She did not tell me immediately because she was frightened by what they contained. Brian kept a laptop on the small desk in the guest cottage. He used it for business and rarely allowed anyone else to touch it. One evening, after he and Megan drove into Asheville for dinner with potential investors, Lily returned to the cottage to collect a textbook. The laptop was open. An email notification appeared in the corner of the screen. The subject line read, Harrison closing deadline. Lily later told me she stood there for nearly a minute arguing with herself. She knew reading her father's email was wrong. She also knew her parents were attempting to make me appear mentally incompetent. In the end, fear for me outweighed loyalty to their privacy. The message came from a development executive named Harold Price. His company planned to build luxury vacation cabins across the southern portion of the orchard. Mr. Price wanted confirmation that Carter Ridge Development held clear title to the property. He also warned that if the sale was not completed within 30 days, his company would demand repayment of its advance. Lily searched the email thread. What she found explained Brian's desperation. His construction company owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to subcontractors. The bank had threatened foreclosure on equipment. A private investor was preparing a lawsuit. Several tax payments were overdue. Brian had already used most of Megan's savings. Carter Ridge Development had received a large advance from the resort company based on Brian's promise that the orchard would soon be transferred. The money was gone. If the sale failed, Brian could not repay it. Lily continued reading. Some messages were between Brian and the developer. Others were between Brian and Megan. In one email, Megan wrote, Mom will never agree, while she believes she is still in control. Brian answered, She won't be in control much longer. Another message discussed the medical certifications. Megan wrote, Are you sure the court won't ask for more? Brian replied. The recorder's office only needs the certification packet. Once the deed is filed, we close before anyone challenges it. Then Lily found the sentence that removed any possibility that Megan had been misled. Make Mom legally invisible long enough to close. After the money clears, we can place her somewhere comfortable and deal with the family later. Lily read that message 3 times. Her own mother had written it, not Brian, not a lawyer. Megan. Lily inserted a flash drive into the laptop and copied the entire email folder. She also photographed several bank statements showing transfers from the resort company into Brian's business account. Before leaving, she forwarded the most important messages to a private email address. The next morning, Lily asked me to meet her near the old packing shed. Her face looked pale. I found something, she said. She handed me the flash drive. What is it? Emails between Mom, Dad, and the developer. My fingers closed around the small piece of plastic. What do they say? Lily began crying. I thought Dad was pressuring her. I thought maybe Mom was scared and making bad choices because of him. I placed a hand on her shoulder. You do not have to protect me from the truth. She knew Grandma. The pain in her voice was not only for me. She was watching the image of her mother collapse. She helped plan everything. We went inside the packing shed where old wooden crates lined the walls. Lily opened the emails on her phone and showed me the messages. When I read Megan's sentence about making me legally invisible, I felt something inside me become still. Until then, a small part of me had clung to the hope that Brian had manipulated her. Megan had always been resentful of the orchard. She had always felt Thomas chose it over her. But she was still my daughter. I wanted to believe some line remained that she would not cross. The email showed she had crossed it willingly. She had discussed placing me in a facility as though she were moving unwanted furniture into storage. She called me a problem to deal with, I whispered. Lily shook her head. I don't understand how she could write that. I don't either. We sent the evidence to Susan using Lily's private account. Susan called within 15 minutes. This is what we needed, she said. The emails demonstrate knowledge and intent. Can you stop the sale now? I am adding them to the emergency filing. But we still need the certified trust amendment, especially the protective clause. The page missing from your office. Yes. Without it, we can still challenge the deed, but the complete document will make the case much stronger. I thought of Thomas's careful habits. He never kept only one copy of anything important. There may be another, I said. Where, I don't know yet. Susan instructed Lily to preserve the laptop evidence without altering anything further. She also warned us that Megan and Brian might notice someone had accessed the files. That warning came too late. When Lily returned to the guest cottage, Megan was waiting beside the desk. The laptop stood open. Where were you? Megan asked. With Grandma. Doing what talking? Megan picked up Lily's phone from the desk. Unlock this. No, I pay for it. That does not give you the right to search it. Brian entered behind Megan. His face was gray with anger. Someone opened my email last night. Lily said nothing. Brian stepped closer. Was it you? I'm not answering that? Megan stared at her daughter. What did Chloe tell you? This is not Grandma's fault. That is not what I asked. Lily reached for her phone, but Megan pulled it away. Unlock it. No. Brian's voice became cold. You're involving yourself in matters you do not understand. I understand you're trying to steal Grandma's land. The room went silent. Megan's face changed. Not guilt. Fear? She thrust the phone back at Lily. You have no idea what your grandmother has put this family through. She trusted you. We are trying to save what should belong to all of us. It belongs to her. Megan stepped forward. It belonged to my father, and he left Grandma in charge. That was temporary. Lily shook her head. You sound like you're waiting for her to die. Megan slapped her. The sound carried through the open cottage window. I had been walking toward the house when I heard it. By the time I reached the cottage, Lily stood with one hand against her cheek. Brian was near the desk, and Megan looked stunned by her own action. Get away from her, I said. Megan turned toward me. This is a family discussion. I am her family. You have poisoned her against us. I told her nothing she could not see for herself. Brian closed the laptop. You should go back to the house, Chloe. This is my property. Do not tell me where to go. Megan's eyes fixed on me. For a moment, I wondered whether she knew about the copied emails. Then she looked at Lily. You are leaving tonight. Fine, Lily said. She packed a bag and moved into my farmhouse bedroom across the hall from mine. That night, we sat together on the floor with Thomas's old photo album spread between us. Neither of us spoke much. Lily had lost the version of her parents she believed in. I had lost the last excuse I had made for my daughter. But we had also gained something powerful. We were no longer isolated. And hidden inside Lily's flash drive was proof that Megan had not simply made a mistake. She had planned to erase me long enough to take everything. The answer came to me while I was looking at a photograph of Thomas standing outside First Carolina Bank. The picture had been taken almost 10 years earlier during a charity fundraiser. Thomas stood beside Susan Whitmore and the bank manager, holding an oversized donation check for the county food pantry. Behind them was a row of safe deposit boxes. I remembered something Thomas had said during the final months of his illness. If anything ever feels wrong after I'm gone, check where I kept what mattered most. At the time, I thought he meant the orchard. Now I wondered whether he had meant something more specific. The next morning, I called First Carolina Bank. The employee confirmed that Thomas and I had jointly rented a safe deposit box. After his death, I remained the only authorized person. Has anyone else tried to access it? I asked. There was a pause. Your daughter contacted us several months ago. She was informed that she was not listed. My heart began beating faster. Megan knew the box existed. That meant Thomas may have hidden something she wanted. Susan met Lily and me at the bank that afternoon. We entered through a private door beside the main lobby and followed an employee into a quiet vault. The metal box was longer than I expected. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were 3 envelopes, a certified document packet, a small notebook, and Thomas's wedding ring. I had placed the ring in his hand before the funeral. Someone at the funeral home must have returned it with his personal belongings, and Thomas had apparently arranged for it to be secured before he became too ill. I pressed the ring against my palm. Beneath it was an envelope with my name written in Thomas's careful handwriting. Chloe. Only that. I opened it. My dearest Chloe, if you are reading this, then either I failed to explain something while I had the strength, or something has happened that made you question whether the orchard is protected. I stopped reading because my vision blurred. Susan waited silently while Lily held my hand. Thomas explained that Brian had approached him nearly 2 years before his diagnosis. Brian wanted permission to use part of the orchard as collateral for a business loan. Thomas refused. Brian argued that the land was being wasted and that Megan would eventually inherit it anyway. Several weeks later, Thomas found Brian inside the study going through financial files. Brian claimed he was searching for insurance information. Thomas did not believe him. He began documenting every conversation. The small notebook inside the box contained dates, summaries, and copies of messages. Thomas had written that Brian seemed obsessed with the orchard's development value. One entry described a dinner during which Megan accused Thomas of planning to leave her nothing but rows of dying trees. Another recorded Brian asking how quickly a successor trustee could take control if the current trustee became ill. I looked up at Susan. Thomas knew. He suspected, she said, but he may not have known how far they would go. The certified packet contained the complete trust amendment. Every missing page was there. The language was precise. Megan could assume control only after 2 independent physicians completed formal evaluations and a court entered an order declaring me legally incapacitated. No informal letter would be sufficient. No family agreement could replace judicial review. No successor trustee could transfer the orchard for personal benefit. Then Susan reached the final section. Her expression changed. What is it, I asked? She read aloud, any beneficiary who knowingly participates in an unauthorized sale transfer, encumbrance, or conversion of trust property shall be deemed to have disclaimed all future beneficial interest in Harrison Apple Orchard. Lily stared at her. What does that mean? It means that if Megan knowingly tried to steal or transfer the property, she loses her inheritance rights to it. I looked down at Thomas's letter. He had added the clause after Brian's questions. Thomas wrote that he hoped it would never be needed. He admitted that he had not told me because I was already carrying too much during his illness. He also feared that confronting Megan without proof would push her farther away. I continued reading. I know you will want to protect her because she is our daughter. That is part of what makes you who you are. But protecting someone from the consequences of cruelty is not always love. Sometimes love must stand behind a locked door and say no. I covered my mouth. Thomas had understood me better than I understood myself. Even after reading Megan's emails, part of me still wanted to save her from the worst consequences. I imagined her as a little girl running between the apple trees, her knees stained with grass, begging Thomas to lift her onto the tractor. I remembered her first day of school, her college graduation the night Lily was born. How could the same child become the woman who planned to place me in a facility and sell my home? Thomas's letter did not answer that question. It gave me permission to stop trying. He ended with words I would carry for the rest of my life. The orchard is not worth more than our family, but neither is family love an excuse to surrender your dignity. Protect the land if you can. Protect yourself no matter what. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried, not the quiet tears I had shed in empty rooms after his death. These were deep, painful sobs that seemed to come from every loss at once. Thomas was gone. Megan had betrayed me. The life I believed we had built together had become evidence in a legal war. Susan waited until I could speak. This document changes everything she said. With the certified amendment, the emails, and the forged medical records, we can challenge the transfer decisively. How soon? I'll file the emergency petition today. What about the developer? We will notify them that title is disputed. That should stop any responsible company from closing. And if they are not responsible, then the injunction becomes essential. At Susan's office, we scanned every page and stored copies in multiple locations. Susan placed the original amendment in her firm's secure vault. Lily emailed the evidence to herself, to Susan, and to a separate storage account. We were not going to allow another document to disappear. Before returning home, I placed Thomas's wedding ring on a chain around my neck. Megan noticed it immediately. "Where did you get that?" she asked. The bank returned it. Her face became still. "You went to the bank?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I did not need your permission." She glanced toward Lily. What else was in the box? I looked directly at her. "Something your father wanted me to have." For the first time since the surveyors arrived, Megan appeared genuinely afraid. That evening, she and Brian argued behind the closed cottage door. I could not hear every word, but I caught enough. "The bank box changes things," Brian said. "You said there wouldn't be another copy." Megan answered, "We have to close before they file anything." My blood turned cold. They knew time was running out. Susan submitted the emergency injunction request late Friday afternoon. The assigned judge had already left for the weekend and would not return until Monday. Susan tried contacting another judge authorized to handle emergency matters. No immediate response came. Meanwhile, Brian called the developer. The closing was moved forward. By Saturday night, we understood the danger. We had the truth. We had the evidence. We had Thomas's protection. But until a judge signed the order, Megan and Brian still held a recorded deed that made their fraud look legal. And desperate people do not slow down when they see justice approaching. They run faster. Monday morning began with a phone call from Dr. Foster's office. The forged medical documents had been formally denied. Dr. Foster was preparing a sworn statement, confirming that she had never evaluated me for incapacity and had never authorized Megan to act on my behalf. It should have felt like good news. Instead, Susan sounded worried. "The developer has scheduled closing for tomorrow," she told me. "We need the injunction before then." "What happens if they close?" "We can still challenge it, but additional money contracts and third parties will complicate everything." Has the judge responded? "Not yet." I looked across the kitchen. Megan sat near the window drinking coffee as though nothing had changed. She did not know Susan was speaking to me, or perhaps she did. By then, every silence in the house felt like surveillance. I ended the call and told Megan I had a medical appointment in Asheville. That part was true. Dr. Foster wanted to examine me and document my mental clarity. "I'll drive you," Megan said. "Carol is taking me." Her spoon stopped against the cup. "You've been spending a lot of time with Carol. She is my friend. She's filling your head with suspicion? No one needs to fill my head with anything." Megan stood. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." For whom? She did not answer. Carol arrived shortly after 10. Lily remained at the orchard because she had an online class and wanted to watch the house. At Dr. Foster's office, I completed a cognitive screening. I remembered lists of words, drew a clock correctly, answered financial questions, and explained the structure of the trust. Dr. Foster looked both relieved and angry. "You show no evidence of incapacity," she said. "I'm documenting that clearly." "Will it help?" "Yes. But Chloe, your daughter's actions may constitute medical identity fraud." Hearing the words spoken aloud made the betrayal feel even more real. While I was at the clinic, my phone rang twice. The first call came from Lily. I was inside the examination room and could not answer. The second came 15 minutes later. Then a text appeared. "Grandma, come home." They changed the locks. I called immediately. Lily answered in tears. "Mom made me leave the house. A locksmith came after you left. Dad says the property belongs to their company now." "Where are you?" "At Carol's driveway. I took my bag, but your things are outside." My knees weakened. Dr. Foster helped me into a chair. Susan was presenting our emergency materials to a judge in another county and was not answering her phone. Carol drove faster than I had ever seen her drive. When we reached the Orchard Road, I saw boxes lined across the front porch. My clothes, Thomas's photographs, the quilt my mother made, kitchen dishes wrapped in newspaper, even the small cedar chest where I kept letters from former students. Megan stood inside the doorway. Brian waited behind her with his phone held upright recording. Lily stood near the fence, her face wet with tears. I climbed out of Carol's car slowly. For one terrible moment, I could not make my legs move. That house had sheltered me for 38 years. I had raised Megan there. I had sat beside Thomas through his final night there. Now my own belongings were stacked outside like trash. "What have you done?" I asked. Megan stepped onto the porch. "We gave you every opportunity to cooperate. You changed the locks on my house. It is not your house anymore." Brian moved closer, keeping the camera pointed at me. "Stay calm, Chloe." His instruction was deliberate. He wanted the recording to show him as reasonable and me as unstable. Megan held out a printed notice. "This informs you that your permission to occupy the property has been terminated." I stared at the paper. "You cannot terminate my right to live here. Carter Ridge Development owns the property." "Because you forged a deed." Brian lowered the phone slightly. "That is a serious accusation. It is the truth." Megan descended one step. "We arranged a room for you at Mountain View Assisted Living. It's clean, safe, and only 20 minutes away. You arranged to put me in a facility for your own good." "No, for your convenience." Her face hardened. "You cannot manage this place. I have managed it longer than you have been an adult. You barely know what day it is. Today is Monday." My appointment began at 10:30. Dr. Foster found no impairment. "Would you like me to continue?" Brian raised the phone again. Megan glanced toward the road where two neighbors had stopped their vehicles. "This does not need to become a spectacle," she said. "You put my life in boxes on the porch, then leave quietly." I stepped toward the door. Brian blocked my path. "Do not enter. Move. This is private property." I looked at Megan. She folded her arms. "Get off my property." The words were so cruel, so impossible that for several seconds I heard nothing else. Not the wind, not Lily crying, not the faint clicking of Brian's camera. Only my daughter's voice telling me I was a stranger at the place where I had spent nearly 4 decades. I climbed the first porch step. Megan pulled out her phone. "I am calling the sheriff. Call him." She seemed surprised. Perhaps she expected me to beg. Instead, I stood beside the boxes and waited. Megan spoke loudly into the phone. "My mother is trespassing on private property. She is emotionally unstable and refusing to leave." I watched Brian's face. He looked pleased. They believed the recorded deed would be enough. They believed the forged medical documents would make every protest sound like confusion. Megan ended the call. "The sheriff will remove you. No lawful officer will remove me without asking questions. You don't understand the paperwork. I understand it better than you hope. For the first time, uncertainty moved across her face. She looked at Brian. He whispered something I could not hear. Lily came to stand beside me. I'm not letting them take you anywhere. Megan pointed toward her. You are not involved. I became involved when you threw Grandma's belongings outside. Neighbors gathered near the gate. Carol stood behind me, with her arms crossed. No one spoke, but their presence changed the atmosphere. Megan's private deception had become public. Minutes passed. I called Susan again. No answer. What I did not know was that she was standing before an emergency judge, arguing that every hour of delay increased the risk that my home would be sold. All I knew was that a sheriff's vehicle had appeared at the end of the Orchard Road. The patrol car moved slowly between the apple trees. Brian adjusted his camera. Megan straightened her shoulders and gathered the fraudulent documents into a folder. She looked confident again. She believed the sheriff was coming to enforce her ownership. I pressed Thomas's wedding ring beneath my blouse and reminded myself of his final words. Protect yourself, no matter what. The patrol car stopped in front of the house. Sheriff Daniel Brooks stepped out. He looked at the boxes, the gathered neighbors, Megan's folder, and my daughter standing in the doorway. Then he turned toward me. Mrs. Harrison, he said, would you like to tell me what happened here? Before I could answer, Megan stepped between us. This woman no longer has any legal right to be on my property. Sheriff Brooks looked at her calmly. We'll determine that after I hear from everyone. For the first time that morning, Megan was not controlling the conversation. But the recorded deed was still in her hands. Susan had not arrived, and I had no idea whether the court had signed the order in time. Sheriff Daniel Brooks did not raise his voice. He did not look impressed by Megan's folder. Brian's camera, or the small crowd gathering beside the Orchard Road. He simply removed a notebook from his pocket and asked everyone to remain where they were. I will hear one person at a time, he said. Megan tightened her grip on the documents. There is nothing complicated about this, Sheriff. Carter Ridge Development owns the property. My mother has been informed that she must leave, and she is refusing. Sheriff Brooks looked at the boxes stacked across the porch. Who placed her belongings outside? We did, Brian answered. She no longer has permission to occupy the house. The sheriff turned toward me. Mrs. Harrison, do you have identification? I reached into my purse and handed him my driver's license. My name is Chloe Harrison. I have lived here for 38 years. The property belongs to the Thomas Harrison Family Trust, and I am its managing trustee. Megan gave an exaggerated sigh. That used to be true. Sheriff Brooks held up one hand. You will have your turn, Mrs. Carter. Megan's expression stiffened. She was not accustomed to being interrupted, especially by someone she expected to support her. The sheriff asked me whether I had received a formal eviction notice. I received that piece of paper today, I said, pointing toward the document in Megan's hand. There was no court hearing and no eviction order. Has any court declared you legally incapacitated? No. Have you voluntarily resigned as trustee? No. Did you authorize the property to be transferred to Carter Ridge Development? Absolutely not. Brian moved the phone closer to my face. Sheriff Brooks looked at him. Put the camera down. I have a right to record. You may record from a reasonable distance, but you will not interfere with my interview. Brian stepped back reluctantly. The sheriff then asked Megan to show him every document supporting her claim. She opened the folder with the confidence of someone presenting the final answer to a simple question. First came the trustee's deed transferring the orchard to Carter Ridge Development LLC. Next came the medical certifications claiming I could no longer manage my affairs. Then she handed him Patricia Nolan's notarized statement and a document naming Megan as successor trustee. Sheriff Brooks read each page carefully. The longer he read, the quieter the porch became. The breeze moved through the trees behind us. A few loose pages inside one of my boxes fluttered against the cardboard. Somewhere near the barn, a dog barked twice and fell silent. Megan shifted her weight. The county recorder accepted everything she said. That proves the transfer is valid. It proves the paperwork was recorded. Sheriff Brooks replied. It does not necessarily prove the paperwork was lawful. Brian lowered his phone. What exactly are you suggesting? I am not suggesting anything yet. He returned to the first page and traced a line with his finger. This says Mrs. Carter became successor trustee after Mrs. Harrison was declared legally incapacitated. That is correct, Megan said. Declared by whom? The doctors. Sheriff Brooks looked at the medical certifications. These documents state that 2 physicians expressed concerns. They determined she could not manage the property. That is not the same as a legal declaration. Megan's confidence began to crack. The trust allows me to take over if she is incapacitated. Do you have the full trust document? She handed him a photocopied packet. I recognized it immediately. The succession page was missing. Sheriff Brooks compared the page numbers. This jumps from page 14 to page 16. It must be a copying error, Megan said. Do you have page 15? Brian stepped forward. The operative language is summarized in the certification. The sheriff ignored him and looked directly at Megan. Mrs. Carter, where is the court order declaring your mother legally incapacitated? The color disappeared from my daughter's face. For a second, she simply stared at him. Then she looked at Brian. He answered for her. The physician certifications activated the succession clause. Sheriff Brooks shook his head. A private medical opinion does not automatically remove an adult's legal rights. I am asking for the court order referenced in your own deed. Megan swallowed. We were advised that it wasn't necessary. Advised by whom? Our legal consultant. What is the consultant's name? Brian stepped closer. This is turning into a legal dispute. Your job is to remove a trespasser. My job is not to remove a 68-year-old woman from a home she has occupied for 38 years based on incomplete paperwork. Megan's voice rose. The property is recorded in our company's name, and you do not have an eviction order. She is dangerous and confused. Sheriff Brooks turned toward me. Mrs. Harrison? Do you know today's date? I told him. Do you know where you are? Harrison Apple Orchard outside Asheville, North Carolina. Who is the current president? I answered correctly. Can you explain why you believe the deed is fraudulent? I described the forged signature, the non-existent physician Dr. Foster's denial, the missing trust page, and the development company created 6 days after Thomas's funeral. Megan interrupted. She has been coached. Sheriff Brooks looked at her sharply. Do not interrupt again. For the first time, I saw fear in Megan's eyes. Not the fear of losing money, but the fear of losing control of the story. The sheriff examined the notary section. This document says Mrs. Harrison appeared before Patricia Nolan on March 18th. Yes, Megan said. I shook my head. On March 18th, I was at Dr. Foster's office for a post-surgery examination. Carol spoke from behind me. I drove her there. I stayed with her the entire afternoon. Sheriff Brooks wrote something in his notebook. He then noticed another inconsistency. The deed was signed on March 17th, but the notary acknowledgement refers to a document dated March 19th. Brian's expression tightened. That is a clerical error. There appear to be several clerical errors. Megan pointed toward my boxes. Sheriff, she cannot stay here. We have a closing scheduled. The moment she said it, she seemed to realize her mistake. Sheriff Brooks looked up. A closing? Brian answered quickly. A business transaction unrelated to this situation. Are you attempting to sell the property? No, Megan said. Yes, I said at the same time. The sheriff stared at both of us. Before he could ask another question, a gray sedan turned into the driveway. Susan Whitmore was behind the wheel. She parked crookedly beside the patrol car and stepped out carrying a leather briefcase and a sealed court envelope. Megan whispered something under her breath. Susan walked directly to Sheriff Brooks. I am Susan Whitmore, counsel for Chloe Harrison and the Thomas Harrison Family Trust. She handed him her identification and then removed a certified document. This is the Complete Trust Amendment. Page 15 requires 2 independent medical evaluations and a court order before any successor trustee may assume authority. Sheriff Brooks compared the certified page with Megan's incomplete packet. Susan then produced another document. This is a temporary emergency injunction signed less than 30 minutes ago. It prohibits Megan Carter Bryan, Carter Ridge Development, LLC, and any associated party from selling, mortgaging, transferring, removing assets from, or interfering with Chloe Harrison's possession of this property. Megan's lips parted. You cannot do this. Susan looked at her. The court already did. Bryan stopped recording. Sheriff Brooks read the order and handed it back. Mrs. Harrison remains entitled to occupy the property. Megan pointed toward the house. But we changed the locks. You will provide her with access immediately. This is our company's property. The court has frozen that claim. Bryan stepped toward the sheriff. You are taking the word of an unstable woman over recorded documents. Sheriff Brooks's voice became firm. I am enforcing a court order and refusing to conduct an unlawful eviction. He looked toward the boxes. You will also return Mrs. Harrison's belongings inside without damaging them. Megan stared at me. The confidence that had carried her through the morning was gone. She had expected me to cry, plead, and disappear into the room she selected for me. Instead, she was standing on my porch while a sheriff ordered her to give me back my home. Susan came to my side. Are you all right? I looked at the cardboard boxes, the neighbors Lily and my daughter. No, I said honestly, but I am still here. Sheriff Brooks instructed Megan and Bryan not to destroy documents or contact the developer about completing the sale. He informed them that the deed and medical certifications would be referred for investigation. Bryan asked whether they were under arrest. Not at this moment, the sheriff replied, but I strongly suggest you speak to an attorney. Megan handed me the new keys. Her fingers were shaking. I took them without speaking. Then I walked past her and entered my house. The living room had been rearranged. Thomas's photographs were missing from the mantel. Several drawers stood open. My home looked familiar and violated at the same time. Lily followed me inside. Behind us, Sheriff Brooks began photographing the documents. Susan placed a hand on my back. This is only the beginning, she said quietly. I understood. The injunction had stopped them from removing me. It had not yet restored the deed, exposed every lie, or decided what consequences Megan would face. But the most dangerous part of their plan had failed. They had tried to make me legally invisible. Instead, the sheriff's question had forced everyone to look directly at what they had done. The investigation began before sunset. Sheriff Brooks contacted the county fraud unit and secured copies of every document Megan had presented. Susan notified the bank, the resort developer, the county recorder, and the title insurance company that the transfer was under legal challenge. By Tuesday morning, the closing had been canceled. Bryan reacted as though cancellation were a temporary inconvenience. It will be rescheduled, he told Megan in the driveway. Once our lawyer explains the paperwork, this all goes away. He spoke loudly enough for me to hear. Perhaps he still believed confidence could change reality. Megan said nothing. She had spent the night in the guest cottage while Lily remained with me in the farmhouse. I heard Megan pacing outside after midnight, making calls and leaving messages that no one seemed eager to return. The first person to cooperate was Patricia Nolan. When investigators contacted her, she initially insisted that every signature had been properly witnessed. Then they showed her my medical appointment records, Carol's statement, and surveillance footage, proving I had been 20 miles away at the time she claimed I appeared before her. Patricia changed her story. Bryan had paid her $5,000 to notarize documents she had not witnessed. He told her the family had already agreed to the transfer and that my physical presence was merely a technical requirement. Patricia admitted she never met me. She had never spoken to me by telephone. She had never seen me sign anything. The second collapse came from the medical records. Dr. Emily Foster provided a sworn affidavit stating that she had never diagnosed me with dementia, cognitive impairment, or incapacity. The document bearing her signature had been created from an insurance form relating to my cataract surgery. Investigators compared the 2 pages. The signature spacing and a small ink mark near the bottom were identical. Someone had copied the entire section. The second physician, Dr. Jonathan Pierce, did not exist. The license number belonged to a retired podiatrist in another state. When Susan told me, I sat at Thomas's desk and stared at the wall. Megan and Brian had not simply exaggerated my grief. They had invented a doctor to erase my legal identity. The financial records were even more damaging. The resort developer had paid Carter Ridge Development an advance of $400,000. Within 48 hours, most of the money had been transferred into Brian's struggling construction company. It paid overdue subcontractors, equipment loans, taxes, and a private lender who had threatened to sue. None of it had been used for the orchard. None of it had been placed in the family trust. Brian had risked my home to save his business. At first, Megan tried to separate herself from him. She asked to speak with me privately in the farmhouse kitchen. Her hair was unwashed and dark circles had formed beneath her eyes. For the first time since moving into the guest cottage, she looked less like a woman controlling a crisis and more like a frightened daughter. Mom, Brian handled the documents, she said. I remained standing. What are you telling me? I signed things he gave me. I knew we were transferring authority, but he said it was legal. You told the sheriff that I was incapacitated because Brian said the doctors had confirmed it. You accompanied me to Dr. Foster. You knew she never evaluated me. Megan looked toward the window. I thought there were additional reports. From the imaginary doctor? Her face tightened. I made mistakes. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. You changed the locks and put my wedding photographs outside. I panicked. You arranged a room in assisted living. We thought you would be safer there. You thought I would be out of the way. Tears appeared in her eyes. I was trying to save my marriage, and you chose to sacrifice me. That is not fair. I almost laughed. Fair? She had forged my incapacity, stolen my home, and publicly described me as unstable. Yet she still believed the unfairness lay in the way I named what she had done. Susan arrived later that afternoon with Lily. She carried printed copies of the emails from Brian's laptop. Megan saw them and stopped speaking. Susan placed one page on the kitchen table. Did Brian write this? She asked. Megan did not answer. Susan read aloud. Make Mom legally invisible long enough to close. After the money clears, we can place her somewhere comfortable and deal with the family later. I watched my daughter's face. There was nowhere left for her to hide. Lily stood near the doorway with her arms folded tightly across her chest. You wrote that, she said. Megan looked at her. Lily, you don't understand the pressure we were under? I understand exactly what those words mean. Your father's company was collapsing. We were going to lose everything. So, you decided Grandma should lose everything first. Megan flinched. Brian entered the kitchen before anyone could answer. You had no right to steal private emails. Lily turned toward him. You had no right to steal an orchard. He looked at Susan. Those messages are taken out of context. Susan remained calm. The context will be examined by the court. Brian pointed toward me. She is not capable of running this property. Everyone knows it. I completed a cognitive evaluation yesterday, I said. Would you like to compare our results? His face darkened. Sheriff Brooks had warned them not to interfere with my possession, but Brian still acted as though intimidation might restore his authority. Susan stepped between us. You should leave the farmhouse. This is my family. This is my client's residence. Megan touched Brian's arm. Go. He stared at her. What? I need to speak to my mother alone. For a moment, I saw the distance between them. Their plan had depended on unity. Now that consequences had arrived, each was searching for a way to survive separately. Brian left without another word. Megan sat at the kitchen table. Lily followed Susan outside, leaving us alone. For several minutes, My daughter stared at the wood grain beneath her hands. Then she said, "Dad loved this orchard more than he loved me." The sentence did not excuse anything, but it revealed the wound beneath her anger. "That is what you have always believed," I said. "He missed my birthday dinner 3 years in a row. Because your birthday came during harvest? He could have chosen me once. He attended your school plays, drove you to college, paid your tuition, and called you every Sunday. He made me feel like a guest here." I sat across from her. "Thomas was not perfect. Neither was I. Perhaps we asked you to understand sacrifices that a child should not have had to understand." Megan's eyes filled. "When Brian said the orchard could save us, it felt like taking back something Dad had withheld. You were not taking something from your father. He was gone. You were taking it from me. I told myself you wouldn't really lose anything. You told the world I had lost my mind." She covered her face. "I did not know how far it would go. You created a company 6 days after his funeral." Her hands dropped. I continued. "You obtained my medical forms. You let relatives speak to me like a child. You wrote that you wanted to make me legally invisible. I was angry. Anger explains a feeling. It does not excuse a plan." Megan began crying. Not the controlled tears she used when she wanted sympathy. These were ragged and humiliating. "I thought once the sale closed, we could fix everything. How we would pay for a beautiful place for you. We would visit. You wouldn't have to worry about the orchard. You were going to replace my freedom with a comfortable room and call it love." She looked at me then. I saw shame, but I also saw the reflex to defend herself. "I am still your daughter." "Yes. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It means your betrayal hurts more than if a stranger had done it." The words seemed to strike her. I had spent months being told that my age made me weak, that my grief made me confused, and that family loyalty required silence. I no longer believed any of it. "You wanted everyone to think I was incapable," I said. "But I understand exactly what happened. You knew the truth, and you chose the money." Megan lowered her head. The investigation continued around us. The deed emails, medical forms, bank transfers, and notary confession formed a chain that could no longer be explained away. The remaining question was not whether Megan had participated. It was how much she would lose because of it. The court hearing took place 6 weeks later. By then, the story had traveled through the county. Some people described it as a family dispute. Others called it elder exploitation. To me, it was the day a judge would decide whether written truth could defeat recorded lies. I arrived with Susan and Lily shortly before 9 in the morning. Megan sat on the opposite side of the courtroom beside her attorney. Brian sat several feet away with a different lawyer. Their separation had begun almost immediately after the investigation exposed the financial records. Megan blamed Brian for creating the false documents. Brian insisted Megan had been the driving force behind the plan. They no longer looked like partners. They looked like two people trapped inside the same sinking boat, each willing to push the other underwater. The judge entered and everyone stood. Susan began with the trust. She presented the original Thomas Harrison Family Trust, the certified amendment from the safe deposit box, and the page establishing the requirements for a successor trustee. 2 independent medical evaluations, a formal court order, judicial confirmation before any transfer of authority. None of those conditions had been met. Susan then presented Dr. Foster's affidavit and the licensing records proving that the second physician did not exist. She showed the court my appointment records demonstrating that I could not have appeared before Patricia Nolan on the date of the notarization. Patricia testified under an agreement with prosecutors. Her voice shook as she admitted accepting money from Brian. "I knew Mrs. Harrison was not present," she said. "I was told the family had agreed, and the signature was only a formality." Susan asked, "Did Chloe Harrison ever authorize you to notarize her signature? No. Did you ever speak with her? No. Did you understand that your stamp would be used to transfer 28 acres of property?" Patricia began crying. "Yes. The judge showed little sympathy. Next came the emails. Brian's attorney objected, but digital records confirmed they came from his account. The resort developer also produced copies from its own servers. Megan's words appeared on a courtroom screen. Make mom legally invisible long enough to close. The sentence looked worse in black letters against a white background than it had on Lily's phone. Susan read it aloud. Megan stared down at the table. The bank records showed where the $400,000 advance had gone. Nearly every dollar flowed into Brian's failing construction business. His attorney argued that saving the company would eventually benefit the family. Susan answered calmly. The Thomas Harrison Family Trust did not exist to rescue Mr. Carter's business. She then presented the development plans: 24 luxury cabins, a restaurant, a swimming pool, a road cutting through the south field, rows of apple trees marked for removal. The plan had been prepared before Megan claimed she was protecting me from the burdens of orchard ownership. Brian testified that the orchard was losing money. Susan produced financial statements showing it remained profitable. Megan testified last. Her attorney tried to portray her as a grieving daughter manipulated by a desperate husband. Megan admitted signing the trustee's deed, but claimed Brian assured her the medical certifications were valid. Susan approached the witness stand. Did you attend your mother's medical appointments? Yes. Did Dr. Foster ever tell you Chloe was incapacitated? No. Did you meet Dr. Jonathan Pierce? No. Did you ask to see a court order declaring your mother incapacitated? No. Did you know your mother had not agreed to sell the orchard? Yes. Did you instruct a locksmith to change the farmhouse locks? Megan hesitated. Yes. Did you place her belongings outside? Yes. Did you call the sheriff and report her as a trespasser? Yes. Did you write that you wanted to make your mother legally invisible long enough to close the sale? Megan's voice became almost inaudible. Yes. Susan returned to her table. There was nothing else to explain. The judge issued the ruling that afternoon. The trustee's deed was void from the beginning because Megan had never lawfully assumed authority. Carter Ridge Development, LLC, had no valid ownership interest in Harrison Apple Orchard. The development agreement was unenforceable. The county recorder was ordered to restore the trust's title. I remained the lawful managing trustee with full authority and a lifetime right to possess and occupy the farmhouse and surrounding land. Then the judge addressed Thomas's protective clause. The room became completely still. The language was unambiguous. Any beneficiary who knowingly participated in an unauthorized transfer of trust property would be considered to have disclaimed all future beneficial interest in the orchard. Megan had participated knowingly. The emails proved it. The judge ruled that she was permanently removed as successor trustee and forfeited her future inheritance rights to Harrison Apple Orchard. My daughter closed her eyes. She had tried to take the property early. Instead, she lost it forever. Brian faced separate criminal investigation for forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and financial misconduct. His creditors were pursuing civil claims, and his construction company entered bankruptcy proceedings. Megan had agreed to cooperate with investigators. Her cooperation reduced the likelihood of immediate incarceration, but it did not erase her responsibility. She would face restitution legal costs and possible probation depending on the criminal case. When court adjourned, Lily hugged me. Susan squeezed my hand. You have your home back, she said. I should have felt only relief. Instead, I looked across the aisle at Megan. She was sitting alone. Brian had already left with his attorney. For one painful second, I saw the little girl who once brought me wildflowers from the orchard and asked whether they were beautiful enough for the kitchen table. Then Megan lifted her head, and the woman she had become looked back at me. Outside the courthouse, she approached slowly. Susan remained nearby, but I nodded for her to give us space. Megan's eyes were red. Does losing the orchard mean I've lost you too? She asked. The question might once have broken my resolve. I chose my words carefully. You did not lose me because of a clause in a trust. She began crying. You lost my trust when you decided my voice, my home, and my dignity were obstacles to your plan. I'm sorry. I believe you are sorry today. What does that mean? It means sorrow after consequences is not the same as change. Megan wiped her face. I don't know how to fix this. You cannot fix it by asking me to pretend it never happened. I'm still your daughter, and I am still your mother. That does not mean you are entitled to my property or immediate forgiveness. She looked toward the courthouse doors. Will you ever speak to me again? I do not know. The honesty hurt both of us. I wanted to comfort her. That instinct had not disappeared, but Thomas's letter had taught me something I had resisted my entire life. Protecting someone from the consequences of cruelty is not always love. Megan needed to face what she had done without using me to soften the impact. I walked away with Lily and Susan. No one applauded. There was no triumphant music, no celebration, and no moment when all the pain suddenly disappeared. Justice does not restore the past. It simply prevents the lie from owning the future. I had kept the orchard, but the greater victory was that a courtroom had finally said what Megan tried so hard to deny. I was competent. I was the lawful owner of my decisions, and I had never been the trespasser. Returning to Harrison Apple Orchard felt different after the court ruling. The land had not changed. The same hills rose beyond the northern trees. The same gravel road curved past the barn. The same white farmhouse stood beneath the old maples. But I had changed. For months I had walked through my home as though every room might be taken from me. Even after the judge restored the title, I still checked the locks twice each night. Susan helped me hire a security company. We replaced every lock, changed the alarm codes, and installed cameras near the office, the guest cottage, and the road entrance. It was not how Thomas and I had lived, but trust once broken changes the architecture of a life. Lily stayed with me through the summer. Together we unpacked the boxes Megan and Brian had placed on the porch. Some photographs were bent. A ceramic bowl Thomas gave me on our 20th anniversary had cracked beneath the weight of several books. Lily offered to throw it away. No, I said. I repaired it with a thin line of gold-colored resin. The crack remained visible, but the bowl became usable again. It seemed appropriate. We returned Thomas's photographs to the mantel. We placed his work boots beside the back door. In his study, I replaced the missing files and organized the legal documents inside a new fireproof cabinet. Every important record was copied and stored in 3 separate locations. Susan updated the trust. Megan was no longer successor trustee. Instead, Susan and Lily would eventually serve as independent co-trustees. Neither could sell mortgage or transfer the orchard without the other's agreement and an outside legal review. I had learned that love was not a substitute for safeguards. The roadside market reopened in August. At first, I worried people would visit only because they had heard about the court case. Some did, but they bought apple cider preserves and fresh pies. They asked about Thomas. They told me they were glad I had stayed. The orchard workers gradually returned to treating me as the person in charge. I did not demand loyalty. I demanded clarity. All contracts came directly to me. No one accepted instructions from family members without written authorization. Bank statements arrived both electronically and on paper. My car keys remained in my own purse. Small freedoms felt sacred after someone had tried to take them. Megan and Brian separated before the end of summer. His construction company collapsed. Creditors seized equipment, and he moved into an apartment near Charlotte while the criminal investigation continued. Megan rented a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Asheville. She began working as a bookkeeper for a medical supply company. Part of her income went toward restitution and legal expenses. She also began therapy. I knew these things because she wrote to me. Her first letter arrived 2 weeks after the hearing. She did not ask about the orchard. She wrote that she had spent years blaming Thomas for every disappointment in her life. She admitted that Brian's financial crisis gave her resentment a purpose. By convincing herself the land already belonged to her, she made theft feel like correction. I read the letter twice and placed it in a drawer. I did not answer. A month later, another letter arrived. then another. Some contained apologies. Others described specific memories she had distorted to support her anger. She wrote about one missed birthday and admitted that Thomas had taken her to dinner the next night. She remembered the school concert he missed, but also recalled that he built the stage set the week before. She was not rewriting Thomas as perfect. She was beginning to see him as human. Still, I did not answer immediately. An apology can be sincere and still arrive before the wounded person is ready to receive it. Several relatives came to see me. My sister Diane was first. She stood in my kitchen with tears in her eyes. "I should have believed you," she said. "You should have asked questions before repeating Megan's claims. I thought I was protecting you." That is what everyone said while taking away my voice. Diane lowered her head. "I'm sorry." I accepted her apology, but I did not make it easy for her. Concern is not permission to speak over someone, I said. Age does not make a person unreliable. Grief does not make a person incompetent. She nodded. Other relatives apologized by telephone. Some blamed Megan, some blamed Brian. Few admitted how quickly they had accepted the idea that I could no longer understand my own life. I became more selective about whom I allowed close. That was not bitterness. It was discernment. 6 months after the court hearing, I agreed to meet Megan at a cafe in Asheville. I chose a public place because I wanted neutral ground. Susan knew where I was, and Lily had my location on her phone. Megan was already seated when I arrived. She stood, but did not attempt to hug me. "Thank you for coming," she said. I sat across from her. For several moments, neither of us spoke. She looked older. Not physically older in a dramatic way, but stripped of the confidence she once wore like armor. "I don't expect you to forgive me today," she said. "That is good. I used to think saying sorry should make someone give you another chance. It does not." "I know." She folded her hands. "I wanted to tell you I'm not with Brian anymore." I heard. "I'm not saying that to blame him. I made my own choices. That mattered more than I wanted it to." She continued. "I lied about your memory. I took your keys. I let people treat you like you were incapable. I did it because if everyone believed you were weak, I did not have to face how wrong I was." I watched her carefully. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." "You came here for something. I want the chance to prove I can become someone you might trust again. Trust is not rebuilt by promises. I know. It is rebuilt through consistent actions, respect, and time." Megan nodded. "I'm willing to wait. You may wait and still not receive what you want." "I understand." I did not know whether she truly understood, but for the first time she was not arguing with my boundary. We agreed that she could write once a month. I would answer when I chose. She would not visit the orchard without an invitation. She would not ask about the trust, Lily's future role, or any inheritance. If she violated those conditions, contact would stop. Megan accepted every rule. When we left the cafe, she stood several feet away from me. "Goodbye, Mom." "Goodbye, Megan." It was not reconciliation. It was a door opened only a few inches, with the chain still fastened. I drove home alone. As I turned onto the orchard road, sunlight fell across the south field, where Brian had planned to build luxury cabins. The orange survey flags were gone. The apple trees remained. So did I. 1 year after Megan told me to get off her property, Harrison Apple Orchard held its largest autumn harvest gathering in nearly a decade. Cars lined both sides of the gravel road. Children carried baskets between the trees. A bluegrass trio played beside the market, and the scent of cinnamon cider and fresh apple pie drifted through the cool air. Thomas would have loved it. I wore his wedding ring on a chain beneath my blouse. The orchard was profitable again, but profit was no longer my only measure of success. During the months after the court case, I partnered with the Blue Ridge Senior Advocacy Center. Together, we began offering free workshops at the farmhouse twice each season. The first workshop covered powers of attorney and family trusts. The second focused on financial warning signs, a relative taking control of mail. Someone discouraging contact with friends, missing bank statements, pressure to sign documents, claims that ordinary forgetfulness proved incapacity, family members speaking to doctors without permission. I told participants that exploitation rarely begins with a stranger breaking through a door. Sometimes it begins with someone you love offering to make your life easier. That sentence always quieted the room. I never used the workshops to publicly humiliate Megan. I did not share the most painful details or read her emails aloud. The goal was not revenge. The goal was prevention. Several older women approached me after the sessions and admitted that their children had taken control of accounts vehicles or property decisions. One woman whispered, "I thought I was being ungrateful for feeling uncomfortable." I held her hand. Discomfort is often the first warning that a boundary has been crossed. Lily helped organize the workshops. She was preparing to graduate from nursing school and had decided to specialize in geriatric care. What happened to our family had changed her understanding of advocacy. Older patients are often talked around instead of talked to, she said. I don't want to become that kind of nurse. I was proud of her. Under the revised trust, Lily would not simply inherit land to sell. She would help oversee a conservation agreement protecting the orchard from large-scale development. She understood that stewardship was different from ownership. That afternoon, while I was arranging jars of apple butter at the market, I saw Megan walking up the road. She wore jeans, a plain sweater, and a volunteer badge from the Advocacy Center. I had invited her to help set up chairs and clean tables. It was the first time she had returned to the orchard since the court hearing. For a moment, my body remembered the boxes on the porch. My shoulders tightened, and my hand moved instinctively toward the keys in my pocket. Then Megan stopped several feet away. "Is it all right if I come closer?" she asked. The question mattered. Yes, she approached slowly. "The parking area needs more signs," she said. "Lily asked me to help direct cars. That would be useful." She nodded and walked away without asking to enter the farmhouse. Throughout the day, Megan worked quietly. She carried chairs, helped older visitors find seats, and cleaned spilled cider from the market floor. She did not introduce herself as the owner's daughter. She did not tell anyone the orchard would someday be hers. She did not mention the trust. Several relatives watched us carefully, perhaps expecting a dramatic reunion. There was none. Healing is usually less dramatic than harm. Harm can happen in one sentence. Get off my property. Healing happens through hundreds of smaller choices. May I come closer? Where would you like these chairs? Is it all right if I leave this here? Do you need help? Near sunset? The crowd began to thin. The mountains turned purple beyond the orchard, and the air grew colder. Megan found me beneath the oldest apple tree on the property. Thomas's grandfather had planted it nearly 90 years earlier. Its trunk was twisted, and one branch needed support. But every fall, it still produced fruit. Megan stood beside me without speaking. Finally, she said, "I used to hate this tree." I looked at her. Why Dad told me it would still be here after all of us were gone. I thought he meant the orchard mattered more than people. What do you think he meant now? That we were supposed to care for something we didn't completely own? I waited. She looked across the field. I spent years believing the orchard was proof that Dad did not love me enough. Brian didn't create that resentment. He only showed me how to use it. That is an important difference. I know. She took a breath. I don't expect to inherit this place. You will not? I understand. Her voice trembled, but she did not argue. I'm trying to understand that losing the orchard was not what broke our family. What I did to take it was. I looked at my daughter. A year earlier, she had stood inside my doorway and treated me like an intruder. Now she stood outside my boundaries and waited for permission. That did not erase the past, but it showed that change, however fragile, had begun. I have forgiven enough to stop carrying hatred, I said. Megan's eyes filled with tears. But forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not the return of control. It is not pretending trust was never broken. I know. Do you? I'm learning. That was the most honest answer she could have given. We stood together beneath the old tree, not close enough to pretend everything was restored, not far enough to say there was no hope. Before leaving, Megan asked whether she could volunteer at the winter workshop. "I'll think about it," I said. She nodded. "Thank you for considering it." Then she walked toward her car. I remained beneath the tree until the last light faded across the south field. A year earlier, I believed my greatest fear was losing the house. But a home is more than walls, land, deeds, or keys. A home is the place where your voice still matters. It is the place where no one is allowed to erase your history, rewrite your competence, or turn your love into permission to control you. Megan nearly took the orchard. For a time, she took my confidence. She made relatives doubt me. She made workers ignore me. She made me question memories I knew were true. But she did not take the most important thing. She did not take my right to stand up. I placed my hand against the rough bark of the old apple tree and thought of Thomas. Keeping the orchard honored the life we built. Protecting it helped other families recognize the signs of exploitation. But reclaiming my voice was the true victory. I was Chloe Harrison. I was a widow, a mother, a grandmother, and the lawful guardian of my own life. I was never a helpless old woman. I was never legally invisible, and I was never trespassing on my own property. There is a dangerous belief that love requires complete trust, even after someone has proven unworthy of it. It does not. You can love a son, daughter, spouse, sibling, or grandchild, and still refuse to give that person control over your home money, medical care, or legal decisions. Family relationships do not erase personal rights. What happened to me did not begin with forged papers or a changed lock. It began with small acts that looked like help. My mail was redirected. My car keys were taken. My mistakes were exaggerated. My daughter began speaking for me instead of speaking with me. By the time she called me incapable, she had already trained other people to stop listening to my voice. That is why boundaries matter. Growing older does not make a person a child. Grief does not automatically destroy judgment. Forgetting a date, misplacing glasses, or needing help after surgery does not give someone permission to seize control of a life. Keep copies of important documents in more than one safe place. Maintain independent access to bank accounts and statements. Do not sign papers you cannot read or do not understand. Speak privately with your own lawyer or doctor when someone pressures you to surrender authority. Most importantly, trust your discomfort. When help begins to feel like control, ask questions. When concern is used to silence you, speak louder. When someone says you are confused because you disagree with them, document everything. Forgiveness is also misunderstood. Forgiving Megan did not mean returning her inheritance. It did not mean giving her keys, authority, or immediate access to my life. Forgiveness allowed me to stop living in hatred, while boundaries protected me from being harmed again. Trust can sometimes grow back, but only through truth, accountability, and consistent behavior over time. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done if your own daughter had put your belongings outside and called you a trespasser? Do you believe Megan deserved a second chance? Or did she cross a line that no apology could repair? And should forgiveness ever mean restoring complete trust? Share your opinion in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. If this story touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who may need this message, and subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and finding your voice when others try to take it away.